Hey y'all, today I'm going to mod a GameCube with what I think is the best bang for the buck option available right now, PicoLoader. It lets me boot Swiss or any Homebrew payload on my GameCube immediately. No disks or save exploits required, and it's not permanent and fully reversible. Anyway, let's get started and I'll explain more as we go. First things first, I'll open the GameCube with a GameBit screwdriver. I'm leaving the controller ports connected since they don't need to be detached for this mod. I'll switch to a number 2 Phillips head and remove the large screws around the sides and back. I mentioned earlier that this is the best bang for the buck and I stand by it. There's another popular Pico-based mod called PicoBoot. It works great, but it requires soldering directly to the GameCube's motherboard. PicoLoader, on the other hand, doesn't and is fully reversible. The mod uses a Raspberry Pi Pico and a Flex PCB that sits between the optical drive and the motherboard. The version I'm using today is the cheapest option, which requires some soldering, but there's a fully solderless version if that's more your speed. I'll link to Max Tech Store in the description if you're interested in buying it. It's also fully open source, so you can 3D print or fabricate most of the necessary components yourself. The GitHub is also linked below. Cost-wise, though, the whole kit ran me around 35 Canadian dollars, which is about 26 USD. That's including shipping and includes 2 Flex PCBs, mounting screws, all the 3D printed pieces, the diode, and the Raspberry Pi Pico itself. While PicoBoot is cheaper, since all you need is a Pico and some wire and potentially a diode, I still prefer PicoLoader because of the ease of install and removal. If I ever want to remove it, I can just pull it out and the console's back to stock. I'm making sure to remove the fan and power assembly as well, since there are a couple of screws hidden underneath, and the back panel just makes it easier to get to the screws. Anyway, with most of the screws gone, I'll also remove these 4 small Phillips head screws near the front of the GameCube using a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver. And I'll set the plates they're holding down aside. Next, I'll disconnect the optical drive and set it aside. That's all we need to do for now, so I can bring out the mod kit. The mod itself uses a Raspberry Pi Pico as the chip, a Flex PCB to intercept the connection between the drive and the mainboard, and a few supporting parts. I'll start by folding the Flex PCB using the provided 3D printed jig. This ensures that I'm folding it exactly where I need to and reduces the risk of me breaking the flex cable or bending something that shouldn't be bent. The shop I ordered from included a second Flex PCB just in case you make any mistakes. Once the Flex is folded properly, I'll go back to the GameCube. Taking it out of the key, I'll set it into the connector for the optical drive. Getting it in can be a bit finicky, but if it's folded correctly, it works like a charm. Now, I could cap off the connector, like so, with the included 3D printed cap. Assuming I don't want an optical drive anymore, but since I want to keep using mine, I'll instead just reconnect the optical drive by putting it back in place. All I need to do is make sure that the flex cable sits in between the little slit in the shielding so that it doesn't get pinched or damaged. Once the drive is in place, I'll move on to mounting and soldering the Pico. At least, once I fix the mistake I made. The flex ribbon needs to be behind this little plastic post next to the shielding. With that sorted, now I'll move on. I'll attach the 3D printed mount for the Pico It screws in using the original GameCube screws, and since I'm only putting it in temporarily, I'll only use one screw to secure it. Next, I'll flip the cube on its side and prepare for the real meat of this mod. First thing I'll do is secure the Pico to the mount with the Flex PCB between the Pico and the mount to try and get everything lined up just right. My Flex PCB is a little bit out of alignment, but the pins match up well enough that it should be fine. Not to mention I just don't want to pop things open and shift it around. So with the Pico mounted, I'm just going to go ahead and solder every pin down. It's really easy work, albeit a little bit time consuming, so I'll just speed through here. Next, I'll unscrew the mount and shift it so I can access the back of the Flex PCB. I'll remount it like that and get on to soldering the last component, which is a diode. The whole point of the diode is just to prevent power feedback. So lining the white strip up facing the line on the diode diagram, I'll bend and cut the legs to size and then begin soldering it down. First thing I do is tin the pads. Then use tweezers to hold the diode in place while attaching the legs to the pads. A little extra solder helps make a strong mechanical connection. With that done, I can mount everything and screw all the shielding back into place. The mount is blocking one screw hole, but it actually includes a screw hole on the side of the mount so that you can hold on to that extra screw and never misplace it. Now with the GameCube almost reassembled, this is the last chance to flash the Pico before closing it up, so I'm going to do that now. If you saw one of my other Pico videos, you'll know how to flash it, but just in case, all I need to do is connect the USB cable from the Pico to my computer while holding down the boot cell button on the Pico, and it will appear as an external drive. On screen, I've got the two folders I need. One is the Pico, the other is the folder with PicoLoader and Swiss that I've downloaded. To install PicoLoader, I just need to copy the PicoLoader UF2 file onto the Pico, and then it will eject and reboot. Once that's done, I just need to make it load Swiss on boot, so I'll reconnect the Pico to my computer while holding boot cell again, grab the appropriate Swiss UF2 file from the PicoLoader folder inside of the Swiss folder that I'm using, and then copy that onto the Pico as well. It'll automatically eject, and then I can just disconnect the USB cable and go back to closing up the GameCube. I'll put the top back on, making sure the cables are tucked away and the disc flap is open to prevent accidentally breaking any clips inside. Then I'll close the flap, flip it over, and screw in the 4 game-bit screws. Now we can test it out. I'm using the same SD card I used in my softmod video, which is still in the SD2 SP2 that's plugged into the bottom in the serial port 2 under the GameCube. On first boot, we have Swiss instantly, which is great. Off camera, I enabled virtual memory cards just because that's one of the settings that's not on by default. So I wanted that since I don't have a memory card in the slot. And then I went ahead and started loading Metroid Prime. We can see that it tells me I need to format the memory card, so I'll do that, start the game. Quick reboot, and I want to just make sure the virtual memory card is working, so we'll go back into Metroid Prime, and there we have it. So with that, I no longer need to rely on a game disk and save exploit to get into Swiss, and I don't need memory cards anymore. At least for the most part. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.